episode number 2 of the Success Equations podcast. And I am happy to be here with my good friend Josh Parpia, who is the owner of iSpot Homes, HomeDuo, and also an avid real estate investor. And with that said, Josh, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Hey, Pat, appreciate you having me on. It's going to be a good one.
I hope so. I'm sure it will be. No pressure. Like I told guest 1, this is episode 2, your guest 2. So, we're still ironing out the kinks. We spent a few minutes before we start taping trying to figure out some technical issues. But I think we got it, at least to get this going. But again, looking forward to it. I know it'll be a good one too, and happy to have you on. So with that said, let's get started. So, take me back, first, let's talk about first how we met, right?
Sure.
So I know I actually met your lovely wife before I met you.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, that's how the story started. So we're back in, 2017, 2018. Wife and I are looking for our first place. I was full-time traveling at the time for a healthcare corporation. My wife went to some open houses, and she found this tiny little house in Gotha where she found the first agent she's ever met who didn't push her into a sale. And that's how she introduced you to me. And I was like, I got to talk to this guy. I was like, I got to find out, who this guy is. So that's kind of when you and I connected. And, we were able to go from there to, closing our first property together, in which you were our buyer's agent, a single family home in Ocoee. And so that kind of got the ball rolling into real estate from there.
So it's actually one of my favorite stories to tell, because in 21 years of working with buyers and sellers, I've only bought leads one time, and they were Zillow leads, and it was that time period, and it was like a 3-month contract or something like that. And I was never a big leads guy. I was always that guy that said, your sphere should be the source of the majority of your business, right? Yeah. But it was, and I haven't bought leads since then. And the only lead that ever panned out was meeting you guys. And, so when I start dogging leads and kind of, going, I always got to remember and tell this Zillow story, how I met you guys, where, it was that your first primary home. And then we sold that one, and you bought the home you're currently living in, right?
Yep. So we sold that one in about 3 years. And I think at that time it had appreciated enough to where we bought our new primary. So we upsized there, and then took the other proceeds and threw it into a rental property on the Hiawassee area. So one sale led to 2 more sales, and it's a snowball effect. So the snowball was tiny at that time, but it got the ball rolling.
It did, and then many investment properties since then. So so it's a great story, and obviously you guys are really good friends of me and Angie now. So it's a great story. It's a great story. So, but all right. So when we met, you tell me what you were doing. What was your job then?
So I was a W-2, and I was working corporate. I was with a healthcare corporation that was manufacturing and selling radiation oncology equipment at that time. And when we met, I was traveling full time, so I was going to different hospitals domestically, a few international hospitals, some really fun trips, Canada and New Zealand, just to point out a couple. And I was on the road all the time, in Ubers, on airplanes, trying to not only do the job that I have, but trying to figure out what else can I do with my life? How else can we kind of escape the 9 to 5, the same corporate, day to days. And so at that point, I think that was when you had introduced me to Bigger Pockets. And I would say that was one of the biggest turning points in my life. And that's for Bigger Pockets, for everyone out there, is this massive company. They have online forums. They put out podcasts weekly. It's all about real estate investing, how to handle your finances. They have a Bigger Pockets Money podcast. They even have a network where you can meet up with local investors. So a huge proponent of what I would say is probably the biggest real estate network within the U.S.
Yeah, it is great. I mean, go back 7 years, I guess that was probably year, 14, 15. And I had, as you know my story. My first investment property was like 2004, 2005. But it was when I discovered Bigger Pockets that it's something about it. I mean, I guess it's just such an awesome resource, right? That it just will take your investing game to the next level. So you're working, and I remember, I was there when you started getting that little bug, that little sparkle in your eye when it came to real estate.
Yeah.
And so it's for those of you that have made the leap from W-2 job where you get that steady paycheck, and it's pretty it can be very monotonous, very mundane, routine, day to day, and take that leap of faith into what you're working for yourself, owning your own business. Walk me through that, because it's not an easy. I'm sure it wasn't an easy decision. I'm sure there was some nerves, some sleepless nights, about
Yeah.
just making that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. So, after full-time traveling for about 4 or 5 years, I was traveling throughout COVID too, where, you would pull up to a Marriott hotel or something in a different city, and it's, you're the only car in the parking lot. So traveling kind of lost its luster when you do it that often and for that long. So channeled that into a sales career with the same exact company. At the same time, while that's happening simultaneously, we're growing our rental portfolio within Central Florida. We're looking at properties that, are hitting great cash on cash return numbers, trying to purchase these properties when interest rates were really low, in hopes that, someday that glimmer you saw in my eye, that was me trying to finding an avenue out of my current position, of the current day to day of being corporate. Um, and so I would say I'm a pretty conservative risk taker for the most part. I like to make usually very planned and calculated decisions. And so for me, it was a number, of that I had to hit, in terms of passive income or in terms of stability with the rental portfolio before I could even consider jumping from that corporate life. Um,
It,
and then,
it,
yeah, go ahead.
oh no, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, no, on the personal side of things, things changed too. My wife and I started family planning, and we had a little one on the way, and I didn't want to be traveling full time. If and when that time came, I wanted to be a very present, mindful dad, and so that is really truly when between the rental portfolio that was gaining steam and a baby on the way, it was at that time for us the most opportune time to kind of take the full leap of faith into real estate investing full time and leave that corporate world behind.
And that's a great way to do it. Great point. Great. You're a great example of, not necessarily having. A lot of people will just make that, quit their corporate job on a Friday, and then that Monday they're launching their brand new business, and
Yeah,
that doesn't always go as planned, especially if it's their first, foray and venture into owning their own business. How that how hard that can be and is.
yeah,
But you were able to start building up, like you said, your rental portfolio, that passive income, where we both know real estate's not always that
yeah,
passive as people make it seem. But and then it helped you make that transition, and obviously the family planning, starting a family, you have a little more control of your schedule, right?
absolutely. Yep, yep.
Which is great, which is great. So tell me about now you've made that decision. You're going to start your own business, and so tell us a little bit about that business, what you're doing.
Sure. So what we're doing right now, so I have a great partner in this business. His name is Julian, and he's grateful enough to meet him at an opportune time for both of us. It was kind of serendipitous how that all happened. But right now we own and operate iSpot Homes. It is a real estate wholesaling business. It's also a real estate investment business. And what we do is we purchase properties. We sometimes we close on them ourselves or keep it in our own portfolios, or sometimes we'll market it out to other buyers, other investors, whether they're flippers or landlords, and we will sell the property over to them. This all happens very quickly, within a 30-day period, as typically we're buying and selling within those 30 days. And we make the margin. We're sort of the middleman in between these sellers and these buyers. So we're just all we do on our end. to kind of summarize it, is we're marrying a very motivated seller with a hungry buyer looking to add to their own investment portfolio. And a lot of flippers like to kind of think as us about us as their sort of real estate acquisitions team. So we're the ones going out there hunting for leads, hunting for deals for them to purchase. Because a lot of investors, you're tied up in, flipping your own projects. You're dealing with contractors and handymen and getting quotes and trying to, put the properties back on the market and trying to make sales. And it's a grueling job. It's exhausting, and you're doing multiple properties at once. It can become very overwhelming. And so if we're able to take the whole real estate acquisition portion of your business off your plate and tackle that pain point for you, we're more than happy to do so. So we've built a fantastic buyers list of a lot of hungry investors, both landlords and flippers, institutional firms, hedge funds, who all kind of enjoy, looking at our deals and moving forward on our deals. So we're typically selling these properties with a lot of built-in equity too.
Very nice. Now, there's a lot of people that are listening to this podcast that have no idea what wholesaling real estate is.
Yeah.
So can you give us kind of an example for those out there that aren't too familiar with the process?
Sure. So real estate wholesaling, so typically our team is looking for properties that are undervalued, and this could be typically coming from a motivated seller for a myriad of reasons. It could be a probate situation where, kids inherited the property from their parents, have no idea how to handle the property, manage it, and just want to offload it for a quick sale. You have other motivated sellers. It could come from a divorce, a husband, wife splitting up. They need to liquidate assets and do a quick cash sale. It could just be, heirs to a property that want to divvy up proceeds. It could be something as simple as, hey, it's a contingent sale. The seller wants to move. They need just a certain amount of money pretty quick in order to be able to move, sell the property, get the proceeds, and move into their new property. So there are a lot of reasons as to why a seller may sell a property under market value, and that's typically who we're looking for, who we're looking to partner with. We do a lot of on-market deals, and by on-market I mean properties that are already listed on the MLS. You might see it on Zillow or Redfin or Realtor.com. These are sellers who already want to sell their property. And especially in Florida in the last year or two, there are a lot of properties sitting stagnant on the market. It could be storm damaged properties from hurricanes Milton and Helene, last year. It could be condos. The condo market has really taken a hit over the last couple of years with higher HOAs. So there are a lot of properties that are sitting on the market, a lot of sellers who thought they were going to be able to liquidate a lot faster, but can't. It just didn't end up panning out that way. So over time, with stagnant property, sellers also tend to become more motivated. They want to take those proceeds and put it into potentially another investment. And so that's where we come in. We're able to negotiate and get properties for a fraction of what they're worth, really, and then make a small margin by selling it off to an investor who can still retain margin after putting in the rehab necessary to get the property to shine.
Very nice. Very nice. Great explanation.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Well done. And much better than when I explain what wholesaling is to people. But that's awesome. So, we talked about it, kind of the premise of the podcast is, why we call it success equations is, we all have our own definition and idea of what success looks like, or, who's successful, or, if you're successful or whatever, but it's relative, right? It's subjective. You can be successful in different areas. The first bucket we always think about is, how much money does somebody have, and whatever that amount is that makes them successful or not. But you could be successful in a whole bunch of different buckets, areas of your life, right? And just kind of, knowing you for as long as I've known you, I follow you, of course, and we talk, and I know how well and successful you've been at, your work and your business, but also, on a personal level, as a father, as a husband, you've really kind of accomplished quite a bit. And I won't tell everybody how old you are, but you've got a long way to go to catch me, in such a relatively short amount of time. You've accomplished quite a bit. But with that said, again, it's kind of the reason why I wanted to start doing the podcast is, and you tell me if you agree, if you disagree, or have a different opinion, is, obviously, nothing comes easy. To be successful at anything, it requires work, requires, hard work, discipline, patience, a whole bunch of things, right? But it's not, there's no secret recipe out there, right? There's a lot of people you can follow, you can learn from, mentors, you can read books, you can listen to podcasts. So are there things that, you do outside of your day at work, your business, that you can attribute to helping you become as successful as you are, if that makes
Yeah.
sense?
No, it's a great question. I think answers might be really subjective here, and I love that because we get to hear everyone's different version of success. And I
Sure.
would say I want to start with talking about seasons of life. So what I call a season of life is when I was in my 20s, trying to save as much money as we potentially could. We were sort of in the accumulation season of life. We want to make as much as possible so we can maybe potentially retire early, we can have more freedom, we can travel more. So I call that the sort of accumulation season. Coming up, I'm in my 30s right now, where, while we're still accumulating, phases and things you really want out of life start to change, or maybe you've hit a certain financial successes or what barriers or goalposts you set for yourself. Maybe you hit your metrics and maybe, you're not as happy as you thought you would be. So how I like to break down success is I read this really great book earlier this year called The 5 Pillars of Wealth by Sahil Bloom. And he breaks down, success or potentially maybe even happiness into these 5 categories. The first one being, I would say some might say the most obvious one, but financial. Financial's there. There are a lot of studies that show, hey, you've reached peak happiness at maybe it used to be $70,000 and it became $100,000 with inflation. And the goalposts keep changing. Will an extra $5,000-$10,000 a year really make a difference in your happiness? Maybe to some it could, and to some it may not. So I think financial was the first pillar he talked about. And when I was in my 20s in the accumulation phase, that's the one I sort of hyper focused on. And again, as we get older, seasons change. And so some of these other pillars really came into play. After financial, the next pillar was physical wealth. Are you getting enough movement? I know, like yourself, you like to work out super early every morning, whether it's a lift and a run or a rucking session or, whatever gets the body moving, the BPM, heart's BPM up. And feeling really good about yourself through fitness and through nutrition. And then the third stage was mental wealth. Mental wealth comes from mental clarity. To some, this could mean something spiritual, maybe something religious, or to others, it could mean something like, peace of mind or a sense of purpose. Anything to help you gain mental clarity and keep you at ease. I think that was super beneficial for me as I was trying to juggle fatherhood and entrepreneurship and taking time out for myself all in one. Number 4 was social wealth, and that kind of had to do with, do you have a sense of community and people around you in your corner? And whether it's family, friends, colleagues, business partners. And so with that one, I always like to remember that you're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Right? So I consciously try to make an effort if I'm trying to get into something new or if I'm trying to sharpen, a specific skill, that I surround myself with people that will help me level up rather than people that'll drag me down. Personal example, like this year I joined a run club. I hate running. Running sucks. I don't enjoy it. I would much rather play a sport, right? So this year I joined a run club, and I have people around me who hold me accountable that get me there every Wednesday night. And over time, I'm not the best runner, but I'm one of the most consistent runners. And over time, my speed has improved and my cardiovascular health has improved greatly. And that's just a small example, but it could apply to business too, right? So this year we traveled to Dallas, my business partner and I, for a real estate mastermind. We're doing 8-9 figures of business annually. We're trying to break into these, similar industries and run similar businesses. Why not be in those rooms where we're surrounded by people who could help us level up? And then, the last pillar of wealth might be the most important for me right now in this season of life, but it's time. It comes into play where I'm deciding, when should I stop working today? It's not a 9 to 5 anymore. It's not hourly, a salary wage. When do I stop working today? When do I pour time into my wife today and pour time into my son? Um, do I have time to see friends and loved ones today? When do I get to spend time with my parents this week or this month? When can I vacation and not where I can be physically present but also mentally present and not thinking about work all the time? How can I scale a real estate portfolio to 20, 30, 50 units if I have to manage all of them? Maybe I want to delegate a bit more or learn how to do that. And so that's where time wealth, I think that's the one I kind of think about a lot every day. What tasks should I be doing and what tasks should I be delegating? So, yeah, that's to summarize, right? Financial, physical, mental, social time. I think if it's a lot to ask out of anyone, but we're all already doing it, whether we're a 10 out of 10 at it or a 1 out of 10 in some of these categories. I just think it's a good place to start when we start talking about, success in general.
That's awesome. That was a great book, and you I had forgotten about that book, and I need to go back and read that book because that was great, and you remembered it all, and didn't have to use it. I didn't see your eyes look down or any kind of cheat sheet or note card. No, that's great. That was fantastic. So yeah, I mean, especially when you own your own business, that last pillar, the time wealth, trying to truly detach and just stop, no matter where you are, right? Whether you're at work or in front of a computer or even with your family, trying to turn that work brain off of what you got to do, what needs to be done, what can you do, yeah, that probably for me has always been the most challenging, right? Especially when there's something, there's fires that come up at work or something, that causes you to get a little stressed out or lose a little sleep.
Absolutely. It's hard. That's, raising a company there are a lot of similarities, analogies to raising a kid, um, being an entrepreneur is so difficult. And you're responsible for other people's wages, other families' well-beings. Um, you have a lot of liability when you're an entrepreneur. But it's another reason when you make the leap from a W-2 to entrepreneurship, it's so much more powerful to be able to wait until you have a safety net in place and not leap with a sort of desperation, but rather a cushion. So you can operate from a position of leverage and not, kind of be trying to just grasp and try to make it happen really quick because it's not going to work that way.
Right.
But I think with all these 5 pillars, if you have some form of balance in your day, and a bit of structure, I'm not ready for the, 4-hour work week just yet. But, we do have to at least I personally have to put a stop sometimes as to how long I work or when I work, just because, we have other things going on, where we have families and we have loved ones that need our care and attention too. And if 100% of us is going to work all the time, I know for a fact that even though, the numbers on the spreadsheet may look pretty good, I'm probably not a happier person overall.
Very true. And if you ever figure out that 4-hour work week,
Yeah.
let me know, right? But no, that's great. So hey, so kind of the last question. It's a two-part question that we I was going to say we always wrap up with, but this is the
Sure.
second
Yeah.
episode, so this is the second
Yeah.
time. Has there been a kind of a greatest lesson learned, during your journey? And part two of that question is advice you would give to people that are, just, in any area, and I was hoping you brought up the running because I know you started running not too long ago. And as you said, I'm a huge advocate of, exercise for, all the obvious reasons, especially if you're a business owner or, just want to have mental clarity and be, feel good and stay around, stay on the planet for as long as possible. But so
Yeah.
any lesson learned that you'd like to share and any advice?
Yeah. I think one of the greatest lessons I learned was, I think growing up, I used to be pretty introverted, going back into school. For me personally, as I, gained more confidence and started becoming more extroverted, I realized that you can't make it on your own. I've been really blessed with incredible mentors throughout this journey. Whether it's in real estate or be a dad, um, or people who, taught me how to run a business, or friends and friends in my corner. So I've been really blessed with a lot of great mentors that I wouldn't really have met if I didn't put myself out there and let everyone know what I'm doing. So there are a lot of people out there who are doing great things and are afraid to talk about it. Um, and I think if you put yourself out there more, whether it's on social media or whether it's attending a meetup that you've been avoiding, every month, whether it's this networking event that you haven't been able to attend, or whether it's someone who has a really big social media following, but you just can't work up the courage to DM, you know, um, I would just say go for it. You have nothing to lose. Um, I random fun fact is, I just watched Owning Manhattan on Netflix, and I was so inspired. I DM'd half of the new Sirhan office here in Florida. And you know what? Some of them got back to me, and we had some great talks about investment properties.
Nice.
I'm not going to go close a deal with them tomorrow, but it's great to know that people usually have each other's backs, especially in the real estate industry, where the more people you know, the more business you're going to do, and the easier you're going to have it. So advice is to get out there, be your authentic self, and just let everyone know what you're doing. Be proud of what you're doing.
That's great. Very good, man. Very good. Well said. I like that. It's and it can be awkward whether you're introverted, extroverted, and it can be a strange feeling, letting everybody know what you're doing, reaching out to people that you don't know, right? Because there's that level of uncomfortableness. But
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. Again, well said. Well said. So, but hey, this has been fantastic. I knew it would be, and I appreciate you being, the guinea pig number two. Um,
Absolutely.
and I'm glad we got through the initial technical difficulties, and I enjoyed it. I hope you did as well.
Yeah.
So,
More than happy, to join you on this. Thanks again for having me on. Looking forward to book number two. When's that coming?
uh, the plan was this year, but
Yeah.
it's now pushed to first quarter of 2026.
Yeah.
So, but all right, man. Hey, again, thank you. It was awesome, and I will talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Pat. Have a good one. Thanks for having me on.